Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Sentinel inaugural podcast. My name is Daniel Altahar, the social media marketing and digital marketing specialist for Sentinel Technologies. Along with me today, I have Mr. Bob Kablusik. He is the Chief Technology Officer here at Sentinel. Thank you for being on.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
And along with him, we have Mr. Mark Combs, the National Director of Enterprise Architecture and Innovation, focuses in security. Thank you for joining us as well today.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Robert.
So we're here kicking off our first podcast, and what's hot right now? Cybersecurity. A lot of folks working from home, secure connections, making sure they're safe and their organizations are safe while they're working from home. So with cybersecurity being top of mind for everyone right now, Bob, what are you seeing in the market?
Yeah, I mean, the trends are very similar to what we've seen in the past. You know, security was top of mind going into this. It's top of mind during this, and will be top of mind afterwards. So certainly, I think there was some shift in priorities, but the mobile workforce has been a big key. You know, it's been a key for quite some time. We've been helping our customers with remote productivity solutions, but along with that, how do we secure those solutions? How do we secure the data in those solutions? During the pandemic here with forced work from home, we've seen a lot of people that have dropped some of their governance and some of their standards to encourage work from home productivity. So that's become top of mind right now. But, you know, I would say that it was top of mind with just a little less urgency even before this. Had a lot of conversations, especially around Office 365 adoption and how do customers, you know, put a governance plan in place? How do we create security standards? And that was happening even before this, work from home effort. And I think that that's just going to continue for quite some time.
Excellent.
A lot of customers have relied, I think, too heavily on just network-centric security. So we're seeing quite a bit of trends in identity access management, mobile and endpoint protection, segmentation and workload. So there's quite a few things that have been trending that we've been helping our customers with.
So you want to chime in on that, Mark?
Yeah, I think, probably especially now since COVID is it's kind of shifted the workforce, right, from on-premise to remote. But even again, not just now, but more prevalent, during these times that, again, the security people are starting to realize that they don't have maybe their on-premise security infrastructure to protect their remote workers when they're at home, or maybe the shift to how do we, provide our users access, whether that's, ramping up VPN connectivity or opening up different security measures within inside their organization, and then protecting those assets for users that are remote during these times.
Yeah, so we know we see an increase in malware and phishing and things of that nature with workers being at home. So we have to ensure that workers are safe from home. And I think this will change the way that things work in the future and the investments that are made in cybersecurity going forward, showing that people, can work from home positively. So do you think that'll change the future outlook on businesses even after the return to the office space?
Yeah, I think it will, because what we're seeing is a lot of our customers, ourselves included, surprisingly productive with the mobile workforce. So I do think that it's going to change the way that people think about working from home and productivity, and then is how we secure it. So to your point, when we look at malware and phishing, just looking at our own reporting in our umbrella dashboard, we were seeing about a 2x increase in malware, about a 3x increase in phishing, and it changes week from week. And I know Mark, he gets the same reports that I do, and we kind of watch the trends. There's definitely a change in activity. We saw some increases, especially at the start of this, also in our incident response team. We had a number of concurrent activities going on, and we saw increased activity across the board. So our incident response activity was much higher. So I think that, with people being mobile, you get off the network. And historically, a lot of people have put a lot of technology and controls on the network, but have not paid enough attention to what happens when they're off the network. How do we secure people when they're down at Panera Bread, right? We're just working mobile under normal conditions. How do we secure that? How do we enforce policy? How do we do URL filtering? How do we see that reporting? And I think that has been, under purchased, I would say, or under considered, as well as the standards that go around that. And I know, Mark, you've been doing a lot of POCs and having a lot of conversations around those technologies.
Yeah, the funny thing that you mentioned is remote workers, and again, around the security threats or maybe the risk, right? The upbeat The risk, my personal opinion, the risk has always been there. I think what happened recently, again, especially during COVID and other things, it's not that the risk it wasn't there before. I think it's just brought to light a little bit. When you went from your remote workers, or your teleworkers, 75% or 25% of your workforce, to now you're 100%, I think people are paying a little bit closer attention to that. And so they're starting to realize the threat's always been there. But again, I think they're starting to pay a little bit closer of attention because now the workforce is 100% remote. So they're starting to see that uptick in different types of threats. Again, it's always been there. So I think that would probably be the silver lining in all of this. But yeah, definitely. We do POCs. Again, my biggest ask when I talk to customers about security risks or trying to evaluate or give them a strategy is, how are they protecting their users or their corporate assets now that they're remote? Everybody's got the next gen firewall, everybody's got their on-prem security appliances or whatever they're doing, but the user's not there anymore, right? The users are remote. So how are we extending that? Whether it's on cloud, SD access, things like that. It's extending that to the user base. So.
All right. And do you see organizations, focusing more on workforce awareness and training to ensure they don't fall for any of these phishing opportunities, malware, things that they might have not focused on before? Us at Sentinel, we have the Wombat training. Maybe other organizations don't have that, and things can look legit and can be a possible threat, a real threat that can shut down an organization and very quickly. And
yeah, that's a good point, Daniel. Yeah, so I'm sorry if you were finishing there. I didn't mean to cut you off, but we are seeing more conversations occurring. I have the luxury of seeing a lot of the orders come through too, and that's an area that Dr. Mike Sternad and our advisory team works on pretty closely from the security awareness. And we've definitely had a lot more conversations around that and business continuity. I would say that a lot of them are coming right now after that urgency to work from home. So everybody was getting everybody connected. And that's why I sort of brought up in the beginning, dropping some of the governance and security standards to get people productive at home. And now people are sort of circling back and saying, okay, well, how do I tighten this back up now? How do I make it work? And one of those is definitely the user awareness, because they're realizing that they're under more attack. Maybe they have a few less protections in place. As Mark mentioned too, I think that rush to work from home, it increased people's awareness of the risk. The risk was always there that people are working remote. Maybe they're not as security aware, so their security IQ isn't as high as it needs to be. But it was in many cases minimal activity in the past. Well, that's increased dramatically very quickly and brought the awareness to the surface.
Excellent. So when we talk about all the risks out there and we talk about zero trust, can you tell us a little bit more about the zero trust workshop that Sentinel is currently offering?
Sure. You want me to take that, Bob? Or?
Why don't you take that one? Zero Trust Workshop's been very, very hot. So
it is a hot topic, and I just want to speak on it a little bit. So zero trust, there's a lot of buzzwords flying through social media on zero trust. And I just want to make sure that, the listeners, whoever's listening to the podcast, zero trust is not a product. It's a framework. It's a methodology. I can't sell you zero trust per se. So the workshops have been really hot. All we're trying to really do on a zero trust workshop, or when we look at zero trust, is we go in with the mindset that we trust no one. No one is trusted, right? I may like you, but I don't trust you necessarily. And it's really looking, comprehensive review of customers' applications, their networks, their workforce. You'll hear a lot about the three pillars, right? The workload, the workforce, and the workplace. Again, we're really focusing on those areas, again, and really trying to get an idea of, who's accessing your workloads. Are your workloads in the cloud? Are you doing hybrid network, right? And customers have workloads that are in the cloud, right? And they extend these VPNs into the cloud. Who's accessing those workloads? How are they being accessed? Bob mentioned business continuity. How are we backing up those workloads, right? We have a lot of customers with, incident response and ransomware events, right, that spread to their backups. Our backups air gapped. A big one that I run into a lot of customers with this, especially with this remote workforce, is how are your users accessing your network now that they're remote? And a lot of answers I get, well, from VPN, from VPN connectivity. And then we get into, areas of passwords and authentication and credentials. And do we know who's accessing our network remotely? A lot of times the answer is no. I mean, if I ask a 9 out of 10 customers, do you require authentication to VPN into your network? Yes. Okay, well, can you tell me who's VPN in right now? No, I can't. And then the final place is the workplace, right? Which is probably a little bit less prevalent now since everybody's remote. But the workplace, again, we're talking about the IoT devices. And even though, sorry to ramble on here, but even though that our workforce is remote, they're still part of the workplace, right? They're just extended over VPN connectivity. So what are those devices, those IoT devices, the laptops? Are they non-corporate laptops? What are those devices accessing my network? That's really what the framework is, this workshop. Again, we dig deep into all areas of zero trust methodology and framework to really try to poke holes, identify gaps within a customer's security infrastructure.
Excellent.
Yeah, Mark, I wanted to comment on something there too. You mentioned the use of VPN, and we have certainly seen an uptick of people buying licensing for VPNs and standing up even VPNs on the fly because they never purchased enough capacity to handle this particular type of a situation. But I'm finding too that, at least myself, working from home, I only have to access a VPN for a couple specific applications, mostly legacy. Sentinel is mostly SaaS. I mean, we're over half SaaS applications. Even though we have Cloud Select, our own hosting centers, we sell AWS and Azure IaaS. It seems to me like less and less people have a need to actually VPN into the corporate data center in order to access an application because so many things have moved to SaaS. Are you seeing that in the Zero Trust workshops, Mark, too? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point because I was just working with a customer the other day. They needed to ramp up secure their VPN and put 2-factor on their VPN, and they're doing all sorts of things. And only a small percentage of their workforce was accessing the environment over VPN. Everybody else used, some type of VDI or virtual desktop solution. And I just asked the question, why do you have to have VPN, right? If we kind of go with a zero trust methodology or framework, if we can get rid of VPN, then I can get rid of the insecure access, the insecure passwords, right? And maybe move those things to a cloud, right? What really do I need access or need VPN for? When you start to ask those questions, again, it starts to raise a lot of eyebrows, and customers start to think, well, yeah, maybe I can get rid of VPN altogether. What do I need access for? So yeah, I am definitely seeing a shift toward, maybe a VPN-less connectivity type of thing.
So this is a new workshop that we're offering, this methodology, and maybe you can give some examples of current customers that have already benefited from taking the workshop and getting the results given back to them.
Yeah, probably should do a podcast and just do a zero trust podcast and get everybody to join. But I'll give you an example. So I do a lot of these zero trust workshops, not just myself. I have a lot of peers that conduct these as well. So some of the benefits, again, some of the benefits or the questions I'll be completely transparent. I'll ask is, for example, with VPN. Let's say in regards to VPN, can your current user take that VPN client, regardless of what type of VPN client, right? Can they take that client and move that to their personal device? Maybe they don't like their work computer and they got a nice big beefy home computer that they bought that's got a lot of processing power and it doesn't have any of the endpoint protection or anything. I find a lot of customers, they can move that VPN client to their home computer and then they VPN into corporate from their home computer. In almost every case, in almost every workshop I've done, usually that is the case, right? Now there might be policies around that say, oh, we don't really allow it, but the ability is there. And I found in healthcare organizations, financial institutions, that users are taking VPN clients, moving it to personal devices, and then now again, you don't have that next gen, AV on there. You don't have that endpoint, solution, right? You've got these personal untrusted devices connecting to your network. That would be like one benefit. Another benefit would be, again, email is still the number one threat vector. If you look, search the internet, read Verizon, the Ponomo, all that stuff. I find a lot of customers, again, will have multi-factor to a point. Maybe it's protecting VPN or maybe it's protecting email, but they don't extend that to other external applications. A lot of times I'll see customers with multi-factor, say on VPN, but they don't extend that to the email, which again, email is a huge risk in that regards from an external perspective, right? A SaaS-based perspective. I think when you start identifying those and kind of, shedding light on those areas, customers start to think about those things and think about their risks associated with those things. I think those are the benefits from the workshop. Bob, and I mentioned too, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about ICE, but I mentioned about moving that VPN client to a non-corporate device. I also say, one of my questions in my workshop is, do you have to authenticate for domain access or wireless access? In many cases, it's yes, we're 100% AD integrated. My follow-up question to that is, okay, great. If I happen to know those AD credentials, could I take that and connect to your wireless from my non-corporate device, right? My personal laptop. And the answer a lot of times is yes, I can do that. We don't allow it, but yeah, the ability is there. So again, trusting which devices are VPN in, trusting which devices are connecting to your network, it's a huge gap in many of my, with many of my customers. Sorry.
Some of that's easier to fill than others too. When I think about products like, even, Azure's MFA, or you think about Duo, especially with Cisco, the device hygiene. I mean, I've seen different customers look at the different levels of licensing, and there are licenses there where you can actually look at the device connected to your network and make decisions based on that device's hygiene, make it based on their location, their geolocation. So there's different things there that you can put in place fairly quickly, that in that case tied to the MFA, that will allow you to do sort of like a posturing of the device, and I think that fits into zero trust as far as, Mark had mentioned, you got the end user, right? But you've also got the device itself, and I think that's a critical thing to consider.
No, absolutely. You mentioned Duo, right? Or just MFA example. So some of the questions, Daniel, too, is I'll mention to customers is, if you don't do business outside the United States, you don't have to trust all networks. So, I don't have to allow you to log into my Outlook web access, right? Or O365 from outside the country. Again, I don't trust those networks. It all comes down to trust. Or maybe I don't want my users to authenticate into my network if they don't have biometrics on their phone, or if their phone is jailbroken. I don't trust that device, right? That's also part of an MFA solution, right? So again, regardless of the MFA solution you choose, you have to think about those things, right? I don't want jailbroken devices on my network. I don't want, maybe you're accessing my network with a certain version of a browser that I don't want to allow. It's not my corporate policy. Again, restricting those things and not trusting those devices, those applications, those networks, that's all part of the security solutions that we're trying to help customers, again, build a strategy around.
With the way things are going, what are some current, security strategies that customers could do to reduce risk today? What can they do, instantly, immediately to reduce their risk? It's definitely with the majority of workers, if they can work from home.
From an internal perspective, from an external? What are we talking about?
From an internal perspective, what do you believe? Well, you know what the greatest risks are, but if you look at that from an internal perspective, what are you seeing that across your customer base?
Well, so emails, from an external perspective, email is still your number one threat vector. Users, they ultimately will click on a link or fall for a phishing attack. Again, there can be some very crafty ones, right? That kind of gets down to the security awareness training, the training that Bob mentioned earlier too. We're training users, right? We're seeing an uptick in ransomware, especially ransomware, different types of malicious links. There was one even around COVID, around collecting Social Security payments, collecting stimulus checks, click here. So we've seen a lot of that. So again, from an external perspective, MFA from a VPN perspective, if you have a VPN, you can definitely put MFA around your email, around your VPN. Again, unfortunately, historically, passwords are just so weak. And even if you're a customer and you have strong passwords, your users end up going to use those passwords on a bunch of other insecure sites. And next thing you know, they're leaked out on the dark web. So those secure passwords are part of breach databases that are out there anyway. So from an internal perspective, though, lateral movement, I get into microsegmentation a little bit in my workshops, but again, there's no silver bullet with security. I'm not going to lie. I always tell customers it's not if, it's when the malicious user gets in your environment or the attack gets in your environment. It's just a matter of time. So I like to surround myself and help my customers talk about damage control. And we talked about backups. We talked about air gaps. I talked about lateral movement. If you can get into microsegmentation a little bit, again, at the end of the day, if a customer gets ransomware on a machine and that machine was not able to spread to other machines, then I think we've done our jobs as security consultants. So that being said, a lot of my customers, they struggle with the local admin passwords on their workstations. And anybody listening to this podcast, please listen to it. I can tell how many customers have the same local admin username and password across all the machines in their environment. It's a huge issue. A huge issue for all of our customers because things get in their environment and then just spreads like wildfire throughout their, the east-west. So mitigating that, obviously, it reduces a ton of risk. And again, putting MFA around any external applications also reduces, in my opinion, it reduces a ton of risk, right? Especially around email and VPN.
I think, the other thing I'd add into there too, Daniels, is Mark talked about quite a few different areas there. Segmentation, reducing that blast radius, right? Assuming that you do get compromised, do you have recovery and air gapping in place? Another sort of a segmentation of your backup so that you know that you can get to it and security around it. But I would almost step back and say, do you know what your risks are? We have advisory assessments for business risk analysis, for example. Have you really stepped through it? And I think the Zero Trust Workshop is a good starting place to get you thinking about it. But if you really want to identify your risks, you probably should do a risk assessment, to some degree. They don't always have to be very, very complicated. Like we go through, we're SOC 2, we're PCI Service Provider 1. So this is normal course of business for us is to go through these types of things. But it isn't for everybody. So identify those risks, identify your most vulnerable assets as a business, and then figure out how do you protect against those? What are you going to do when they're compromised? Not if, but when they're compromised, how can you react? How can you respond? How can you protect your customers' data from being lost? How do you protect from a breach? Not just ransomware. It makes a lot of headlines, but what about a breach? I mean, that could be a PR nightmare, So there's quite a bit of risk that I think needs to be considered, as well as planning for some sort of an incident. When you respond, do you have an incident response firm on retainer? That's been a hot topic for us as well, as customers asking us, can we get you on retainer? Can you be tied into my incident response policy and team? Can we do tabletop exercises to practice this for when it does happen? Are you connected to my cyber insurer so we know who to contact there and who to work with? Those are all things that I think people could step back with now as time permits and take a look at the business, look at the risk, and figure out what are the priorities. Where do we go after this first?
Absolutely, Bob. I want to add on to what you're saying. You mentioned earlier about business continuity, which is a big part of advisory services, what we do. When I do these Zero Trust workshops, I have a few questions on there about business continuity. Again, are your backups air gapped? Are you doing regular backups? Do you have a business continuity strategy, DR runbook, those type of things? I find my customers, some of them, very few, do have like a business continuity plan, DR runbook and stuff, but they've never executed on it. And that's another gap within itself, right? Because we do have customers that are part of incident, right? They get ransomware and stuff, and then they go to execute their business continuity plan and find out, oh, I have to recall tapes, or it's going to take me 3 weeks to restore that data because I'm backing it up to a cloud provider. And then, the meantime to restore. They don't realize it until a disaster hits. That's definitely something that, Sentinel can help with as well. Again, we offer those type of services, testing those type of things as well. Things that definitely customers should look at when they're talking about reducing risk.
So from a higher level, seeing based on the productivity that you're seeing from at-home workers and moving into the future with better protocols in place and better security, do you see this being a standard thing? Work at home in the future, even after the office spaces open up and this pandemic comes to an end? Is that the future of business?
I don't know if it's a future of every business. I think the mobile workforce has been accelerating for quite some time now. And the tools to be productive, being off the network, so to speak, have evolved. You look at Microsoft Teams, you look at Cisco WebEx Teams, you look at Slack, and you look at a lot of different things out there. Video conferencing. I mean, just how we're doing this podcast today. That's would normally be in the office. We'd be in a room.
Right.
Maybe it would appear a little bit differently. We'd have more professional backgrounds, maybe, but this is how we work today. And it was already accelerating. And I think that people were trying to get their arms around how do they do this? What kind of mobile device management do they need? What kind of security do they need? The pandemic just thrust us into it right away, and so now people had to respond and businesses had to respond. And now they're stepping back, and I think they're going to look at it and say, okay, how do we make this a permanently viable solution? Doesn't mean everybody's going to work from home forever. I think most people are going back to the workplace. Some people just physically can't. They don't have jobs that even allow for it. But this is going to enable a lot more mobile productivity.
Excellent.
I think to add to that too, Daniel and Bob, I think, I agree with the workforce. I think what happens is kind of what I was talking about business continuity is, I think in the beginning, about 5 weeks ago, is it 6 weeks now, maybe a little longer, people really freaked out, right? Because everybody was remote just at the drop of a hat. And then things kind of settled down a little bit, right? People got into their routine. They got into their, whatever, their WebEx, their Zoom meetings, or all this, right? And then it kind of figured it out. Going forward, like I said, I don't think we're going to be at a permanent work from home type of thing, like Bob said. But I definitely think that you may see more regular testing, maybe an annual, biannual, or maybe a certain percentage of the workforce is forced to work from home to test those controls that they put in place so they're not surprised again. So at least that's my hope, or that people just won't go back to work and then throw everything that they've done out the window and not test it for 2 more years or 3 more years. So you might have a little bit more of that. So that, or you're going to have a lot of great lessons learned when people finally do get back in the workplace of, okay, what did we do wrong? Where did we mess up? Where's our gaps at? And then try to fill those for next time. Because again, just like ransomware, I don't think this is the end. And again, hopefully, but there could be something 5 years from now, 6 years from now. But again, I don't think people want to be surprised again.
So any last words you'd like to give our viewers today for Sentinel's first inaugural podcast? Close on cybersecurity topic.
No, I would just say, look, if you want to have just a completely open security conversation, you can gauge us, gauge Sentinel, engage myself. We can get you in touch with the right people, even myself. If you want to have one of these zero trust workshops, if you want to just talk shop and security, again, they take about 60 minutes. I'll ask you a ton of different security questions regarding your infrastructure, try to poke holes in everything possible. And like I said, those are completely free right now. So you may learn a little bit, about your infrastructure. You might learn a little bit about your infrastructure, and again, secure it a little bit better. That's all. So,
Bob?
And I would add that the workshops are excellent. So we talked about the zero trust. We also have a NIST alignment workshop. We do a Microsoft Teams workshop as well. So there's a number of different options available that we have. A remote worker workshop. The other thing that we didn't touch upon heavily, but maybe a topic for another podcast might be, how do you test? How do you test your security? We've seen a lot of activity with pen testing, and we have a remote workforce pen tester where we assume a compromised remote worker and take a look at what's your danger, what is your risk of a compromised remote worker, and how can we move laterally within your network? That's an excellent engagement as well. So we've got a number of different places we could take you as far as your direction goes and what your journey is for security, and just reach out to us, reach out to Sentinel for help.
Yeah. For everybody joining in, we'd like to thank you for tuning in today. From myself, Daniel Taher, Mr. Bob Kavlusik, Mr. Mark Combs, thank you for joining in, and we hope to see you again soon. Do this again.
All right, cool. All right, thanks, guys.